It's time for Tech Talk.
There is news on what's hot and what's not in the world of technology with Mathew Dickerson on Tech Talk. Here on TCFM.
There you go, heard the whole lot of it today.
That's right. We waited for the last bit. I think last week we actually cut in on the last part when it said DCFM.
I know.
And we've learnt.
I know. Well, I got into trouble from that.
Oh, good.
From the person who does the voice. It's Chris who does the voice.
Yeah.
Follows me at 12. Mate, federal government could lead the world in regulating big tech companies like Facebook, Google, and other overseas ones, Amazon presumably. This is an amazing piece of legislation if they can get it through and if they can get control over it. Can they?
Well, that's a very good question. But there's actually a part of that I think is really exciting, and maybe it'll stop some of the things that are happening at the moment, which may not be so good for consumers. But I think the concept is exciting. In Australia at the moment, if you want to broadcast free-to-air TV, so the Channel 9, 7, 10, etc., you have to have at least 55% of local content. Now, it used to be some great old Australian dramas, Country Practice, those sort of old dramas that people loved. But unfortunately now, they've turned most of those to reality TV.
Or these quiz shows. And
quiz shows.
Well, they've always done those, but anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So, but at least it gives the chance for people in Australia that want to be involved in the scene to actually get a chance to say, hey, I'm on Australian TV, whether it be in a reality show or whether it be in a quiz show, whatever. It gives them an opportunity. Streaming services, so you've got the Netflixes, the Disney, the Apple Plus, those sort of streaming services have no requirement for that whatsoever. Now, this is where the federal government's looking at that in particular, saying, is it unfair that Australian producers must have a certain amount of content, but overseas ones, no requirement whatsoever?
I think it's remarkably unfair, and we're on a policy here at a radio station, community broadcast. We must play 25 or more % of music per hour of Australian content. I have no problem with that. In fact, I'm really happy to do it.
Yep.
And we've found some really good artists locally that we play.
Yeah, right.
Some from the Blue Mountains, Canandra, Byron Bay, Port Macquarie, all over the place, South Australia. We're happy to do it.
Yeah.
So, and I think it should come in.
So, and maybe you might argue that 55% is too high, so maybe it would drop for everyone. It might drop all of them down to, say, 40%. But there's certainly some discussion to occur there, and I think that's pretty exciting. So there's a whole division that's been created within the federal government. $26.9 million has been spent on this division, and that particular one with the amount of content will be one of the first things looked at. They'll also look at some of the social media giants, the Facebooks, etc., that you mentioned, and just look at the content that's being delivered in Australia and whether or not we should be changing that, modifying that. And again, as you say there, can they do it? We don't know yet. Will it make a change to those particular companies worldwide? Because at the moment, they're happy to produce a bit of content and then every country it goes into, except sometimes China. But let's leave them out for the moment. But essentially, it's the same, whereas there might be some requirements there to start to modify it per country, as would happen, for example, if you're going to produce a car, you've got to adhere to the quality and safety standards in a particular country. Now, obviously, they normally manufacture to a standard above all of those, so it satisfies all countries. But again, it's individual countries that have had the chance to have a say on what's happening. And this might be the same for some of these electronic mediums. So it'll be interesting. Stay tuned.
We will. And looking at that one very, very closely. Now, divorce lawyers are using geo-tracking apps as evidence of cheating. OMG.
Well, the first story I heard about
this is classic.
Was a woman who was just analysing some of the fitness data from her Fitbit and her husband's Fitbit on a wrist, and noticed that when he was away at some seminars and conferences, which he attended on a regular basis, there seemed to be a lot of physical activity happening in the early hours of the morning, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And she couldn't quite work out why he'd been at a seminar and a conference, and you might go out and sit around at a bar till late hours, but there just seemed to be these spikes in activity. She didn't think he was going to the gym at that time and started fishing around a little bit and finally got to the point where his physical activity was in the bedroom.
Well, obviously.
That's right. Rather than in the gym.
Yes.
He might have argued he was trying to stay fit while he's away, I'm not sure. But that was one. The other one that caught my attention was someone who had a shared Uber account. So him and his wife had a shared Uber account, and she was getting notifications through of Uber drives or Uber rides, and no problems there, except she noticed again away at conferences, and suddenly there were 3 or 4 Uber rides per night from other locations in the city that he was in to his motel. couldn't work out what was happening. Apparently he was getting escorts to come and visit him. Seemed like a very busy boy if he had 3 or 4 visits on a night, but he had escorts coming to visit him at the motel. And again, this was caught out by using some of the tracking data in the various apps. So I suppose the thing to think about here is we're really not sure about where our location is being tracked, what apps are using that location, and where that information is available. Now, I think these people got what they deserve, but just be aware of where your location might be shared and who might be able to see where you are. In this case, someone caught someone doing the wrong thing, but in some cases it might be someone tracking them for a whole range of other reasons where the person looking at where you are might be trying to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, I tell you what, 3 or 4 Ubers a night.
Busy boy.
I was going to say, big wallet.
Yeah, that too.
Indeed. Well, let's get off that and talk about cryptocurrency. This is an interesting story about the widow who's left heartbroken. Her hubby died unexpectedly and had all the passwords.
Well, I'm not sure if I feel sympathy for the widow or I think she's part of the whole ruse. Apparently, Gerald Cotton had started up one of a number of cryptocurrency companies around the world. Got to the point where there was about $200 million in Aussie dollars in his wallet, and only he had the password. The passwords were not in his will. His wife supposedly didn't have them, and then he died, supposedly taking all that money. Now, all that money wasn't his technically, it had been invested. Yeah. So you've got some investors that aren't really that happy about the fact that this guy's died, and they say you can't take it with you to the grave, but apparently you can take it with you to the grave. But people are actually now asking for his body to be taken out of his gravesite, to be exhumed, and basically check that it is him there, do some DNA tests on the body. Now, if it was legitimate that he's actually died and the widow's there heartbroken, I absolute sympathy for her. I think it'd be terrible to have to go through all that. But I think there's some investors worried about whether it really is Gerald Cotton under the ground. Gerald Cotton might be somewhere else with $200 million in his back pocket to live the life that he wants to live, and he can keep feeding some of that money through to his wife, and she can join him in some years' time. So, yeah, it seems like an interesting one, but these are some of the risks. When people talk to me about investing in cryptocurrency, I say, yeah, look, I'd think about it very hard, I'd do all the research, and then I wouldn't do it.
No, exactly indeed. And yeah, anyway, I suppose the other thing is if they exhume his body, it turns out to be him, he'd turn out his pockets anyway. You might be able to find them.
Might have written down the paper.
I was going to say turn his pockets out anyway. The first electric plane flown for 15 minutes.
Well, and there's been some other test electric planes. This particular one is the first potential commercial use for electric planes. So they took an old 1957 de Havilland DHC-2, an old workhorse. So it's a really reliable plane used by lots of commuter companies around the world, and they thought that'd be a good place to start because it is such a reliable airframe. They converted it to electric and then did, as you said, a 15-minute flight. Now, obviously, they're going to fly for longer than that when they get going.
Yeah, the question is, okay, it's got to be run on batteries. Batteries are heavy.
Yeah.
So that means they've got to have a reduced payload for people and these sort of things. There's a lot of research need to be done there before we can get, I don't know, say a Sydney to New York on an electric plane.
Well, and I think the Sydney to New York is something that is a long way away, and maybe the whole idea is to get to the stage where electric planes are used for some short hops. So this particular company talks about doing trips typically of 100 miles. So not long trips and not ones that would take very long, but the efficiencies gained from an electric plane in that are incredible. So the cost of running an electric plane is so much cheaper than cost of running a kerosene or a traditional fuel plane, and obviously it's better for the environment. You haven't got all that pollution there. But again, this is the research that's being done. Now, this company says that with that first demonstration flight, they're less than 2 years away from converting their fleet over to have all their planes in their fleet. And it's only a small fleet running on electric planes. You've hit the nail on the head in terms of the problem. You've got extra weight in those batteries. And unlike fuel, when you're burning fuel, the plane gets lighter. So a plane on a long flight will actually go to higher heights above the earth as the payload becomes lighter as they burn that fuel. With an electric plane, it doesn't get lighter when you use up the actual energy in the battery.
And you've got a problem with landing with that heavy weight.
That's right.
That's got to be looked at as well, because planes, as you know, if they have to take off, there's something wrong, they have to circle, burn the fuel before they can land.
Yeah, that's right, dump some fuel, because the landing, the impact on the actual landing gear is much higher when the plane is actually heavier. So some research being done there, but pretty exciting, I think.
Very quickly, Matt, the self-driving freight truck that drove across America to deliver butter. Now, we've got to finish on a good story this year,
Sure.
and that's it.
California to Pennsylvania, 41 hours, self-driving truck. It had a driver sitting in the seat, and interestingly enough, the truck still had to take breaks at the apportioned time for a driver sitting in a truck, because as far as the government was concerned, there was still a person there who would get tired and need to take a break. So even though he did nothing, he didn't touch the steering wheel, he sat there, and then the truck would pull over and he'd have a break, and they'd have the required break, and they'd keep driving again not touching the wheel. This particular company producing this self-driving technology has focused on freight trucks because they see that as an easier way to get a win rather than, say, cars, the Google cars, the Teslas, those sort of cars that are doing all the self-driving around streets in the city, very complicated. Mostly the trucks are on interstates, motorways, freeways, that type of thing. So it's much easier to have self-driving on there. There are fewer distractions, and it's simpler for what the truck's got to do. So they've got this first version of it, and again, I can see this rolling out. It'll be a brave man to predict against autonomous driving for at least some of the freight trucks in maybe the next 5 years.
Yeah, indeed. All right. Listen, mate, you have a good Christmas.
Thank you.
We will catch you in early January.
Excellent.
A bit hard next Wednesday.
Oh, we could talk about all the presents, all the wonderful technology presents you have under your tree.
And the following week we'll catch you, and I believe we'll be catching you a couple of times overseas. We'll talk overseas, which will be on the night.
We'll see what's happening.
Well,
in
we've done Tech Talk from Poland,
yeah.
and a couple of times, so we may as well we'll do it somewhere else in the world in January. No doubt. Have a good Christmas, mate.
Thank you, and same to you, and of course all the DCFM listeners. Thanks for having me on air all year. It's been fantastic talking about technology, which I love to do.
Yes,
and hopefully some people out there are listening to it.
Well, they are. I can assure you of that. They are indeed. It's coming up to 23 minutes to 10. DCFM 88.9 with Elvis Presley this morning, and he's got a bit of a heartbreak in a hotel.